Good afternoon. It's good to see everybody back. Today we're having a special session with a special guest. We're doing an FAQ with a property inspector. Not only will he share his experiences, but also he will give the answers to the questions most the buyers and sellers ask. If you have a question that is not answered, there will be a Q&A session following the FAQ. This week, we'll begin with a preview of the next seminar, which is on May 11th, 3 weeks from now. Normally, I would do this at the end, but I wanted to allow our guest to tell you about it in person. Mr. David Bonacorsi is a practicing real estate attorney who is also the legal advisor for the Chinese American Real Estate Association. You may remember him from our previous seminar, Prone to Protection, about rent collection and eviction during COVID-19. Hello, Mr. Bonacorsi, how are you?
Good evening, Coco. Wonderful. Thank you for inviting me.
Great. Can you tell us briefly about what you will be talking about and why people should attend, even if they have already been to your previous talk?
This is a completely new area that has gotten lost in all of the focus on rent moratoriums. It came into effect on January 1st, 2020, just 3 months before the pandemic hit all of us. It's called AB 1482, or the Tenant Protection Act of 2019. And it's a statewide law that if you don't have rent control in your local jurisdiction, that you are not, as a landlord, allowed to evict your tenants without just cause. And there are certain rent caps, and this is a particularly good time to focus in on it, because if you're going to try to increase your rent for your tenant and it's subject to 1482, you have to look at the last 12 months to determine what was the CPI, because you can only increase your rent for the next year only 5% above the current CPI. So if you're trying to look at rent increases and the ability to evict as the moratoriums get lifted and you can go back to court, you may be tripped up by not knowing enough about AB 1482. And this is a good opportunity for a refresher course or for you to learn about it if you haven't heard about it before.
Great, thank you. I hope everyone can join us in 3 weeks. Have a great rest of your day, David Bonacorsi.
And enjoy the seminar. Mr. Stone is a wonderful man. So I know you'll have a good program tonight. So
thank you so much. Yeah.
Bye now.
Thank you. Okay. Hello, everyone again. My name is Coco Tan. I'm a realtor with Keller Realty in the San Francisco Bay Area. Now, unlike Mr. Bonacorsi, I may not be an attorney, but I am a full service guide who will help you either sell your home or buy your dream home. Sometimes both at the same time. To stay up to date with my active listings, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel and connect with me on WeChat. I know I always remind you, but that's because most of my listings will be gone before our next seminar. All you have to do is to scan those QR codes behind me. And if you want to sell your home, give me a call or stay after to chat. Today's guest is someone who I work with professionally all the time. He has been our guest before many months ago. Mr. Larry Tringali is the owner of a local family-run property inspection company here in the Bay Area. He has also been a realtor for the past 30 years. Larry likes to say that his company is big enough to serve you and small enough to care. I'm proud to welcome Mr. Larry Tringali back to speak again. Hello, Larry. How are you today?
I lost my voice. I can't talk.
That's unbelievable. So,
Fine.
What do you want to share with our audience today?
In the past, I've done the question, what's the most common problem that we find, which ends up being foundation. But some of you may have already gone through that foundation part. Maybe some of you haven't. So the other topic I picked for tonight is the most frequent problems that we find on reports that buyers end up calling about. So I'm going to devote half of my time to those things. That's plumbing, electrical, there's all kinds of stuff in that section. And then towards the end, when I've got like 20 minutes left, I'll go to the foundation part because that's important. And if people have not been here before, they should hear that again, or maybe as a refresher. So let's start at the top. I called the office and asked them, what are most of the pictures about that you see? And so she gave me a whole list. Starting at the top of the house roof, they will walk the roof, and if you see problems, they'll take pictures. The most common problems they see with the roof is exposed nails. Obviously, there's nails and everything. And the way a roof is put on, there's a shingle put on, and then it's nailed. Then another shingle is put on top of that, so the nail's covered. You don't see it. It should be about 4 or 5 inches underneath the last shingle laid over. So if you do see a nail there, and sometimes they can't help it because like the flashing, the flashing is that metal stuff. See those pipe things sticking up out of the roof, and around the bottom of that there's metal, and that metal is called flashing. Well, that has to get nailed down so it doesn't slide off. So when you nail it down, there's this like tar stuff you'd put over the seams of the flashing, or you'd put over the nails. 15, 20 years later, that tar gets kind of cracked, and the cracked tar could lead to a leak. Or the nail should have the tar over the top of it. If that dries out and cracks. Now, the basic thing of what a roof is, the roof is, first it's plywood. How do you cover the plywood, make it waterproof? You put tar paper over it. Is that good enough? No, the tar paper is only going to last maybe 1 or 2 years if sun gets on it. So the whole point of all the shingles and all the stuff you see is protect the tar paper. So they put the shingles on. So if people see, they look up at a roof and they go, oh, look, there's a shingle missing. Well, if the shingle's missing and underneath that is another shingle, you're fine, because the shingle isn't what keeps the water out. It's the tar paper. So the whole point, keep that in mind. Tar paper is what keeps it waterproof. That's the waterproof barrier. So all the shingles are doing is keeping the sun and weather from getting into the tar paper. So if you see a roof and it seems like wrinkly, and you look at the roof and it's all wrinkly and it looks not so good, you go, oh, I'm surprised it doesn't leak. You don't know. It could be fine. Again, it's the tar paper underneath. So that's the things we find up there. Little, places where water could penetrate through the tar paper because of that damn nail. If there was no nail there, I wouldn't care. But since the nail was there, the nail went through the tar paper, water could seep down through that. So you got to cover the top of it with tar. Okay, enough about that. Now we'll go down to like the gutters. Then you get to the gutters. Well, the gutters could be filled with, in the old days, they were metal. If it's a metal gutter and it's filled with leaves or something, that leaves is going to cause rust. Water gets in there, it's going to rust. After a few years, the rust will make holes inside the gutter. Real expensive to take care of those holes. So that's why you'd want to keep the gutters clean. But these days it's plastic. So you'd say, well, what the heck? The plastic's going to last forever. Why do I bother cleaning the gutters? The reason that you'd want to clean it then is because the water comes off the roof and you don't want it just dripping down all over the house. You want the water going from the roof to the downspout. Ideally, these days, it goes down the downspout into the sewer system. Because in the old days, it went down the downspout and went like 2 or 3 inches away. And this leads into the foundation. Why the foundation cracked? Because the ground around it settled. Why does settled water got there? Because the stupid downspout just dumped all the water over that huge surface, the roof. All this water is collecting. What's it do? It dumps it all right there, right next to the house. So you would want the water not to go, I'm diverting a little bit. When the water comes down the downspout, you want it to go away from the house, at least 3 or 4 feet away from the house. So what if it doesn't get to the downspout because the gutter's clogged? Now it's going all around the whole house. You've got water deposited all around the whole house from the roof, and you don't want that either, because again, that can damage the soil, not damage. It just makes the soil settle, which would wreck the foundation. Okay, now done with that, done with the downspouts. Now we're going to, well, what if there is a leak sometimes in an old house? It does leak. Where's it going to show? It'll show on the rafters. So when they go in the attic, they're going to see the rafters and go, hey, I know new wood. And when water has gotten through the wood, it makes those little squiggly lines. What the water does is gets into the wood, pushes the oils from the wood down. And so the oils leave these little tracer marks of where it got pushed down. So when my inspectors go in there, Sometimes they'll take a picture if it's severe, and sometimes they won't. But the frequent comment is there's evidence of prior leakage, but there's no evidence that it's leaking now. So then you go out and how old's the house? 50 years old. So you look at the roof looks fine. So it's probably not leaking now. This is sometime a long time ago, it was leaking. So if you see that evidence of prior leakage, I get a lot of calls. It says it was leakage. Yeah, I'm looking at the report. Doesn't it say prior leakage? It used to be leaking. How do I know it's not working now? Well, you don't. Go get a hose, stand on top of the roof with a hose and see if it leaks. But if you look at the roof, you can probably tell. It was a long time ago, so don't worry about that. Then the next thing would be, another thing you might find in the attic is the wiring. All the wiring, you can't have like extension cords plugged from one thing to another thing. In the house you can, because you can see them, but inside hidden areas like in the walls or in the attic or underneath the house, you can't, because they might spark. They might, a rat or something might come along, chew the sucker, expose the wire. Now it can short out, make a spark and make a fire. So junction boxes, and a junction box is when you have wires all come into one spot. Like there's one, where the circuit breaker is on the side of the house. That's the main place where electricity goes. Then it sends it out. All these wires go all through the house, and one big old wire goes up to the roof. To the ceiling in the attic. And from there, it says, okay, we need some from this big source of energy. We need some that go over to this room and this room and this room and down the walls. That place where they all join is called the junction box. The junction box has a lot going on inside there. You don't want all those joints exposed. You want that junction box, when the wires come in there, they should be in a big, like a metal cable, not just a little plastic wire, in a metal cable, goes inside. So if there's a spark, it's inside the metal. Who's going to know? It's not going to get out and cause a fire. Frequently, we see junction boxes with no cover plate on it, because it had a cover plate on it. Someone had to do some work in there. They took the cover plate off and said, well, next time I come up here, I don't have to deal with that damn cover plate. I'm just going to leave it laying here. That's a stupid idea. So it needs to have a cover plate on it. Now, that's not a horrible thing, but you can understand if there was a spark, you don't want the house to burn down. Why? Oh, I forgot to put the cover plate on. So now we're into the attic. Then someone will also say, well, did they crawl all over the attic? Most often attics are insulated. If they're insulated, it's that fiber. You can't breathe that fiber. So my guys will pop their head up in the attic and look around. If it's not insulated, they can crawl to wherever they can get to look around and see what they see. But if it's insulated with that fiber stuff, they're not likely to go in. They will just say attic inspected from observation from the crawl space. From the attic access. So they'll stick their head up with a flashlight, look and see anything they can see from there. But that is kind of a limited inspection, because they're not going to risk getting lung cancer because of, you wanted to know, is there anything else going on in your attic? But, we've been doing this for a long time, and that's adequate. There's usually nothing going on up in the attic. Usually what they're going to find is maybe they'll find rat droppings. Let you know, hey, you got rat poop up there. That's something to pay attention to. But normally when they built the house, it was fine. It was inspected, and no one has gone up there crawling around. So nothing has really changed in 50 or 80 years, however long the house has been there. Okay, now we'll get to, go down into the house. Now it's water. Water's the issue once you're walking around in the house. So the first thing that they'll do when they get there is they turn all the water on in the house. All the sinks, the toilets, the showers, everything on the house gets turned on, so that it'll be running for about 10 or 15 minutes. So when they go underneath the house, if something is leaking, you got to give it time to get down through the walls or through everything to start puddling underneath. I just did one 3 days ago, and she thought it was fine. And I went and turned everything on, and sure enough, right under the kitchen, there was a puddle. Puddle was like, 2 feet around and like 4 inches deep. That sucker been leaking there for a while. So I pounded on the flooring and said, turn the water off in the sink. You got a puddle coming down here, and it makes it worse. You'd never know if someone didn't go down there. And, and speaking of that, here's something I'll tell you. Someone went in and had a house repiped. The house was repiped. Fine. We went and inspected it. They weren't done yet. Said, okay, when they're done repiping it, I'll go back and look, just to look around. And the buyer was curious what's going on underneath the house. So we went underneath the house, and he crawled with me to show him the foundation and show him all this stuff. And then as we were walking around, crawling around, I heard this noise. I go, what's that? And with a flashlight looked over, that when they had repiped the house, they forgot to hook up the master bathroom tub drain to anything. Nothing. There was a white pipe coming down, this plastic pipe coming down. And when we looked at the flashlight, it was a lake. The lake was about 6-8 feet wide and about 20 feet long. The whole downstairs was filling up with water. God, oh no. And say, see the light over there? That's the access. Quick, go over there, run upstairs and turn the water off. Now that was just redone. And had it been done any other time, it was just a nice coincidence. I was there after they did the repiping, and you would think the repiping, they would have remembered to do that. But he found out later, they did everything in the repiping except for that because they weren't finished with the bathroom. They had to, some other guys had to redo the bathroom. Well, the guys who redid the bathroom, and then put the pipe going down. No one ever told the plumber, we didn't go down there and hook it up. So it was just laying there. What would have happened is they would have used that thing for long time, and eventually they would have gotten a smell. What's that smell? I don't know. Get someone in here. And they would discover it's mold. Where's the mold coming from? Look down. The whole bottom of this house is covered with black. Why? Because the water had been building up there. Every time they used it, it'd be like a giant lake after a couple of years. It would get warm during the summer. It would make mold, and the whole bottom. I mean, that would have been a disaster. I mean, you can imagine the whole body of your house is a huge lake, because for 3 years, you didn't know the master bathroom tub and shower just went right straight underneath your house and was making a lake. All right. So you get any work done, no matter how much you pay that guy, if it's downstairs underneath the house piping, make sure someone goes there to look. You can do it. Anybody can do it. You just pop your head down in there with a flashlight, look around, turn everything on, make sure you don't hear any leaking. You could hear it. That's a lesson for your life. Okay, where were we? Oh yeah, leaking. So they're going to turn everything on, and a very common thing that we'll see is leaking underneath the bathroom sink or underneath the kitchen sink, underneath somewhere there'll be actual leaking, or sometimes there's evidence. Something had been leaking there, and so you can look at the wood, and the wood's solid, it's okay, but you can tell at one point it had been wet, so it's got those white lines going through it. So that's no big deal. If it's evidence of prior leaking, that's what it is. I say this 1,000 times to some people. Evidence of prior leaking means it was leaking. If you're worried about it, go turn the sink on. If it's leaking, you got a problem. If it's not leaking, you don't have a problem. Stop asking me about this, okay? Okay. Sometimes they will be leaking from like the stall shower. Well, it depends. You got to just use common sense. You see where it's leaking, and if it's like coming out of the wall, you turn the faucets on, it's just like dripping down the tile. Go, uh-oh. It could be leaking inside the wall. It's leaking inside the wall. You got to get someone to go in there and fix that. I mean, that's a big problem. It goes down, mold inside the wall. If it's leaking from like the shower head, it's coming out of the hoses. I mean, the pipes coming out of the wall. The shower head's leaking. Well, who cares? It's leaking out. It's not going to go anywhere. You only care if the leak could be, looks like, use your common sense, leaking inside the wall. Get someone out there, fix that immediately. Then another thing that we'll find is caulking. People don't caulk. The water's like the biggest enemy. Foundation, what's the big enemy? Water. Inside the house, big problem, water. Caulking is to keep the water in the tub and up against the tile, out of the flooring. So if you go into anywhere, even your house, I mean, all of you go look at your caulking now. If you see somewhere where the caulking is not there, that means the caulking is going inside. After a while, it's going to get in there. It's going to make it mushed. It's going to make it mold. Big problem. Or the floor, especially if you got kids, the linoleum floor up against the flooring and the tub. If that isn't caulked real well, it's going to be a problem. We find a lot of leaking or absence of caulking. So take care of those. And then another thing, while we're in the bathroom, anywhere where there's electricity and water, you have to have a GFI. and the GFI has to be put in properly. That means it needs to be grounded. Grounded means, what the GFI is if you plug a dryer or something into that, and it's a regular socket, it could short out inside. And if you happen to be touching the water and you're holding the dryer, the electricity goes right from the socket through you to the water. Zappo, you get a big shock, or else you're dead. So the GFI is there. So if something happened, a big surge happens, oh no, you're not going through me electricity. You're staying in here. That's too much to let it go out. That's what the GFI is for. It pops something out. It says, oh, we got a surge here. Something's going wrong. If it's not grounded, if that GFI isn't grounded, the surge is going to go right through to you. It's supposed to get to the GFI. It says there's a problem, and it goes to the ground. The piece of metal hooked onto the house or something. No big deal. So if they're not grounded, it's like having a sink with a plug in the bottom to not leak, but you don't have the plug in. It's useless. It's gonna the water go right through the drain and go wherever it's supposed to, or the electricity without being grounded will go through to you. That's a problem. Okay, that's off the top of my head. What else do we have here? Oh, now we've gone through the house. Then there's carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide. The smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors. The whole point of the carbon monoxide detector is you don't want the gas from an electrical outlet to get to you while you're sleeping. Theoretically, while you're awake, you would smell it and know. But when you're sleeping, you know what the hell's going on. You could get it. So the most common place for gas to be in the home would be in the kitchen. If there's a gas, stove or oven. So if you have a gas stove or oven in the middle of the house and you've got some bedrooms to that way and some bedrooms to that way, you've got to have a carbon monoxide detector on both sides, because that's the whole point. Keep the gas away from you when you're sleeping. Then you've got this issue about there's two types of carbon monoxide detectors. Some are built in with the smoke detector, and those are typically up on the ceiling. There's another type that you can plug into a wall. Now those are plugged into the wall, and they're typically about 18 inches from the floor, where a socket would be. So here's just a little bit of common sense. Now, carbon monoxide is heavier than air. So if carbon monoxide leaks, it would go down. It's going to stay low. Well, why do they put it up? They put it up because if there's a fire, the carbon monoxide is going to get heavy. I'm not heavy. It's going to get lighter because it's heated, and then it's going to go up. So if there's a fire, the carbon monoxide will get heated and go up and click the carbon monoxide detector up on the ceiling. But what if there's no fire? It's never going to get to there. Carbon monoxide is going to go down on the ground, creep up, and if there's enough of it, creep up and get you in bed while you're asleep, and you'll be dead. What happened? Oh, it never got up to the damn ceiling because it wasn't too hot. It got to your nose before it got to the ceiling. So if you have a carbon monoxide detector and it's up on the ceiling, my background is biochemistry. That's why I know the stuff that a lot of people don't know, is don't put it on the ceiling. It's useless. Carbon monoxide detector on the ceiling is no good unless there's a fire. But if there's a fire, the last thing you'd be worrying about, you want to get the hell out of the house. You're not going to say, oh, good thing I got my gas mask on, so I know where a carbon monoxide. You're just going to get the heck out of there. So if you have a carbon monoxide detector, get the wall plug it in 18 inches lower than where you're normally sleeping. And that's a good reason why you don't want to sleep on the floor. Then let's go to the garage. In the garage has a bunch of issues about it. You will sometimes see in the rafters, you'll see evidence of leaking, prior leaking, and you see the staining up there and you don't know, is it leaking now or not? You have to go look at the roof and say, gee, the roof looks kind of shoddy. Maybe it is leaking. You don't know. It's just evidence that something at some point was leaking. In between the garage and the house, there needs to be a fire barrier. The most common place for explosions in a house was from the hot water heater exploding or something exploding in the garage. The hot water heater was on the ground, has a little flame, the flame to keep it hot. If you have paint down there, paint fumes are heavier than the air. So paint fumes would seep, if you had an open can, paint fumes would seep out of there, go along the ground, slide along the ground. All of a sudden they find the little pilot light and then kaboom. From the hot water heater all the way to the paint can, that whole thing blows up and then you got a fire. So that's why quite a few years ago, they said, we can't have these stupid hot water heaters on the ground anymore. We have to have them 18 inches up. So 18 inches up is where the flame is. And usually the paint fumes or whatever you've got down there. I mean, a lot of different sprays. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff you could have that's flammable fume. Oh, like if you have a lawnmower, where's the gas can? It's probably sitting right there. Duh, that's pretty flammable. So that's why the hot water heater is up 18 inches. And then if a fire did happen in the garage, they'd say, let's make sure it doesn't get into the house. So that's why it's sheetrocked. It could be just regular old stuff on the outside perimeter. You'll see that's nothing. It's the just the studs, wood studs. And then on the other side of that, you might see the tar paper and it'll be stuck on the other side. But where the house section is, it needs to be sheetrock. What if there's a hole in the sheetrock? Because someone did something. If there's a hole in the sheetrock and there's a fire in the garage, the fire is going to find that hole. Sparks are going to jump in there. What's on the other side? It's the wood. Now, the wood inside your walls is going to catch on fire. You got a problem. So there can't be any holes in anywhere. Also, the door, people may open up the door and shut the door and won't shut all the way. So the door from the garage to the house has to have an automatic shutter. And it can't just sort of shut it. Has to really shut it all the way. So my guys test that. The door also, interior doors are just that, two pieces of real thin wood pasted together. They're not going to stop anything. Fire gets up to that, it's going to stop it. So the door needs to be a solid core, solid wood. That sucker is going to take a lot, solid wood, inch and a half thick. That sucker's not going to burn right away. It could burn eventually, but you'll smell it before it breaks through, the fire breaks through that. So it has to be solid door, or you can have one of those old regular interior doors, but then you have to cover the exterior of it facing the garage with sheet metal. So the whole thing looks like a big tinfoil thing. Well, not tinfoil, I can't use tinfoil, that's too thin. You have to get one of those sheet metal things, like the kind of sheet metal that you would have laying down on the garage floor to catch oil, or flashing, real thick, non-bendable sheet metal. That sheet metal would be covering the whole side of the door, the inside of the door. So if fire did go up to it, it can't get through. And that's everywhere. Everywhere you see, you stand there and look at if you see any hole, a little hole, like there used to be a wire that went through and it came out. You got to plug that sucker up. You can plug it up with you can't use like the putty stuff. You can't lose like caulking. Caulking is like a plastic. It will melt or maybe ignite. You have to use the caulking like you'd put like around tile, like that grout, that stuff that's made out of cement and stuff. Plug the hole with that, or sheetrock, cover it with sheetrock. Sheetrock's not flammable, so that's a good barrier. Let's see. I'm looking at the notes my girl gave me. Oh, okay. Now we're going underneath. The typical thing besides cracking, crack foundation, underneath the house will frequently see evidence of prior leakage, or maybe evidence of water penetration. When you go underneath the house, you see the cement, and the cement will have this sort of white stuff on it. And sometimes the white stuff is like in a line. There's moisture all the time in the air. When the moisture goes up against the concrete, if it's during the winter, the concrete will be colder. The moisture will hit that and it condenses. The minerals or stuff will adhere to the cement. Then when cement warms up, the water disappears. Does it take that mineral deposit with it? No, it just leaves it there. So years later, you're going to get these white effervescent deposits of minerals around there. That just means that you're living in a place around water. There's water in the air. There's water everything around here. There's nothing wrong with that. If it was in a line, like let's say you did at some parts, like some parts of Almaden, some parts of Willow Glen, some known areas used to be like Blossom Valley. Why is it Blossom Valley? It's where all the trees were. Why are the trees were? Because there's a natural settling for the water in that area to irrigate the trees. Well, now there's homes in a lot of those areas. So the water just naturally migrates there, and you might get puddling or standing water underneath the house. Even then, it's not good, but it's not a disaster. You just get a sump pump. You put it, they dig it down, the sump pump sits in one spot, all the water gets collected and gets shot out. So we could go down there and say, gee, it feels a little bit moist, but we'll see where water had been there. Maybe some winter when it rained, water had gotten down in there, and the water and the ground, clay, too saturated, it couldn't absorb the water. So it sat there for a little bit. The minerals leached out of the water, got into the cement. Now the water's gone. And so all we see is that white line. It's no big deal. If it was a deal, it'd be big cracks, or we'd see big areas where the dirt isn't there. It's just washed away. Well, even then, I've done that to places you go, you see, and where it washed away because of something was on the outside, something on the inside, and there's a chunk of this foundation, and there's an area like, 6 inches or 2 feet. It's a big hole underneath. There's no dirt there. Fine. It needs dirt. It needs something. So you could put bricks in there, just put bricks or something solid in there, and get something and pound it in, like with the edge of a sledgehammer or something, and pound it in, make it as tight as the dirt around it. There, it's fixed. It's not that big a deal. And even it was 2 feet, the whole house isn't going to crash down because you got 2 feet of foundation. It just looks better if you have it supported. Then while we're down here, the cracks, if you see vertical cracks in a foundation, the whole point of a foundation is strong because of the rebar. If the rebar is there, it'll stay strong. If the rebar gets wet, it could rust. And if it rusts, it could deteriorate. Then you could have the foundation crinkling away. A horizontal crack isn't that big of a deal because if the crack is, let's say, 1/4 inch wide, water gets in there and hits the rebar, it's going to disintegrate 1/4 inch of the rebar. All the rest is there. Who cares? The house doesn't even know 1/4 inch of the rebar is gone. But if it's a long, long crack, like 10 feet, 15 feet or so, horizontal, and the water does happen to get down in that could wipe it out. But then you need to look at it and see, is water really going to get down in there? If you look at the outside of the house and there's no cracking there, it's just on the inside, how's the moisture going to get in there? The moisture could get in there, but not a lot. So then you could there's cement goo. It's like caulking for cement. You can go get that at Home Depot, fill that sucker up to keep all the moisture out. There you go. You're done. I think I might be done. I could think of other stuff, but if someone has questions, go ahead and ask me questions because I want to leave some time for that for you.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. We actually have collected quite a few questions from our audience. We have been streaming live on Zoom, YouTube, Facebook, WeChat, and Yijibo. So let's start the Q&A. From Chirag, this is a very good question, actually. In those days, there's no inspection contingency in order to win the bid, right? So how do you evaluate the cracks in the foundation? You just mentioned about horizontal cracks and vertical cracks in the foundation. How do you know when serious? You mentioned the length of the crack. How about horizontal versus vertical? What's your take on that?
Okay, yeah, we just did the horizontal versus vertical. And then just in general, yesterday I had to go look at a house because of that. And today some lady had an inspection with someone else, and then the agent said, go call Larry because she was concerned about it. So the house was built in the 50s. So consider the age. If the house is built in the 50s, and the first thing I asked her was, do you notice sloping, crowning, we call it? Is it like when you go into like downtown San Jose, some of those older areas were built in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, there'll be crowning. You can tell it's sloping. Then you can go underneath and see why is it crowning. Well, chances are it's crowning because somewhere water made it sag. So when was the house built? 20s. Oh, it's built in the 20s. So it's 80. It's been 100 years, 100 years. So that's what's happened in 100 years. You might see some cracks down there, and the cracks might be, it could be anything. There's some place you look and the cracks are 2 inches. fill the sucker in. You get a foundation guy in there, he said, oh, this will be $80,000. You have to redo the whole damn thing. You go, well, what if I can't do that? What if I just want to stop it? Okay, you can stop it from getting worse, like horizontal crack or vertical crack, fill it in, and then to make so the crack won't get any bigger, which is the sort of inexpensive way. If it's over an inch, once you fill it in, it might still separate if you're going to be there for a long time. If you're planning on, if you're in your 30s or so and you might be there for 40 years, you might want to keep it from separating anymore. So they do have straps. They're like 1/4-inch straps that they can drill these holes into the cement, bolt these straps in along that, like every 6 or 8 inches along that crack. They fill it, put these bolts in there. It's not going to separate anymore. Way, way, way cheaper and just as effective, because the whole point of all this is it tolerable to live with this upstairs? Some people lived in a house for, 20 years and they're fine. We go down and say, you got big cracks. Oh, geez, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Like they're ready to sell the house and move to another state. Hey, it didn't bother you yesterday. It's probably not going to bother you tomorrow. Just fill the cracks in with something. Make it so it's not going to get worse. Fill it in. That's, handyman can do that. Just get that cement goo. If it's like 1/2 inch or more, fill it in with that and maybe get straps. If it's little, you don't need the straps. Just fill it in because, figure you got another 30 years or so before it's going to get worse, before you ever notice crowning. Like this lady I asked today, do the doors open and shut fine? Yeah. Windows open and shut fine? Yeah. Crowning? Well, maybe a little bit. Well, then you're fine. You're fine. It doesn't really matter. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, basically, if it's similar size, is the horizontal cracks more serious or is the vertical crack?
Yes, and horizontal crack is more serious because the water penetration. The cement will stay intact as long as water doesn't get to the rebar. If the crack is horizontal, water could come down and slip into, let's say, a 10-foot section. It could slide inside the foundation and get to the rebar and rust it, which takes a long, 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 long time. Now, if you've got the rebars rusted in a section that's like 10 feet long, and if we get there, because this has been going on for 30 or 40 years, the cement is crinkly. You look like, oh, geez, it's crinkly. What happened? We know what happened. Water somewhere got inside there. If it's a vertical crack, you can have vertical cracks, several of them, but they're only like 1/8 of an inch. So if water got in that, this little part of the rebar is rusted. Everything else is fine. So the most of the cement doesn't even know that little chunk of rebar is gone because it rusted. Vertical cracks, rarely a problem. Horizontal cracks, depending on where they were. That's on the outside. Like the worst thing is you look at the outside of a house and you see a crack and the bottom lip is sticking out and the top lip is down. So when the rain comes down off the house, it hits that bottom lip and then goes inside. Absolute worst thing you can do. Absolute worst thing, that, if you've got crowning and something's wrong, that's what the problem is. But if it's fine, if you discover this and there's nothing wrong on the inside, you really are lucky. Just seal that up. Get the gook, seal it up and say, don't go any worse. Once you seal up, it'll take a long time it's already rusted inside there. The rust is still there, but it'll take a long, long time for that rust to deteriorate enough so that the cement around it is wrecked. Just seal that up and hope you're not there in another 60 years.
So when property inspector goes down to the crawl space and realize there's a crack, and then they actually refer to a structure engineer or a foundation inspector for additional investigation, but we don't have any time to do that because the bidding war is very fierce. So what would be your recommendation?
My recommendation, like I told this lady today, is she's moving in the house in 2 weeks. She's in her 60s. And first thing I asked her was, where was it? And it's an area of Cambrian. Cambrian doesn't have an area where it's just sinking ground. Blossom Valley does, Almaden Valley does, Willow Glen does. Very few other areas do. Some areas like Alviso does, some areas Sunnyvale. If you're near the water, if you're Almaden, Blossom Valley, Yeah, that's odd. But if you're not near the water like most everywhere else, it's not a problem. So she doesn't have crowning. I would not worry about it. Don't worry, just go down and look. And if there is cracks down there, fill the suckers in. Anybody can fill those in. Just because we told you about the problem doesn't mean it's going to be a problem. She's going to live in this house for another 20, 30 years and never know. The crowning isn't bad. The door is open and shut. It functions perfect. It functions perfect. To keep it from getting worse, go fill the cracks in. She doesn't need it. If you call a foundation guy out there, it's $250. He's going to scare the hell out of you. It's going to be thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars just to fix the foundation and make it perfect. Why do you need to make it perfect? Because if it's not perfect, your house will fall down. Well, wait a minute. It's not going to really fall down, is it? What's the first thing that'll happen? The windows won't go up and down because it's settling. The doors won't shut. And I'll notice crowning. Do you notice any of that now? No. Well, then what the hell? We've got a long, long time before the damn house falls down. I don't even notice the first symptoms. Like I'm going to bleed to death. What's the first thing? You got to see a scratch. Do you see a scratch? I see a baby scratch. Is it bleeding? No. Well, I think you're not going to bleed to death then. You got a long way to go. So the big fear is bleeding to death. The big fear is the foundation shot. There's a way long time. A lot of little scratches can happen on you before you bleed to death, and a lot of crap can happen to the foundation before you have to move. When it'll be a concern is when you go to sell. Someone else is going to go down there and see it. So then before you sell or when you move in, get the goo, fill all that stuff in. Maybe if it's over, quarter inch to half an inch, strap it. Get those metal straps. Very often, as a matter of fact, I almost forgot to tell you this. Every single report we have, every report says minor cracks noticed, which is typical for a home of this age and in this area. Well, except that the home is like 2, 3, 4 years old. We don't put that in. We're going to look stupid. But if it's over 5 or 8 years, you're going to see some cracking. And then people will call me frequently about that and say, what do I do? And my standard line is, if you want to find a house with no cracking, move to Arizona. There's no water there in Arizona on the ground. It's not settling to be fine. But if you want to live here, every home, hundreds and thousands of homes around you, all have minor cracking. No one is moving their house. Who do you know who had to move out of the house because the foundation fell apart? No one. Okay. You're just like everyone else then. It's not going to be a problem. Don't get worried about it. And then if they're really worried about it, just say, hey, I know this old Italian guy. Call him. He'll make you feel better. Have him call me. I'll make him feel better.
I love that, scared to death, the bleeding to death. If you only have a scratch right now.
That's a little crack. Oh, I'm bleeding to death. You idiot.
Okay, so a couple more questions on that. So if the house is sloping, like the doors couldn't be open or closed correctly, or the windows cannot do that, so that could be a sign of the foundation issue, but that's not always caused by foundation. Is that correct?
No, because many homes who have that, you have to look at the season. It will be seasonal, like especially those areas that I mentioned, so areas of Blossom Valley where they've got moisture in the ground. Some areas, if you're higher, there's no moisture there, and then you never have that issue. But if we're going through a drought, there's no water. What's happening to the ground? The ground is shrinking down. So it might settle just a quarter of an inch. So a door that's shut all the time and everything was okay, was fine, all of a sudden it's not. We're in a drought. And if they fix it, then when the drought is all done, it starts raining again. Now the ground is going to go back up. So the quarter inch that was gone now is going to come back. So if it rubs a little bit, be tentative about that, especially if you live Willow Glen, Blossom Valley, Almaden, that area. You're more susceptible to these settling issues there, and seasonal. It can be seasonal. It's no big deal. Because again, I'd say you're worried about your house. Look, there's 5,000 houses all around you. Everyone here seems to be happy and fine. They're living with it. If you don't want to live with it, go somewhere else. But it's not that big a deal.
Okay. So you mentioned about Willow Glen, which is very famous for that soil, right? So the settlement.
Yeah.
So there's another question about Warm Spring, Fremont. Many homes there also have foundation crack issues. So do you happen to know, is that also a geographic reason as well?
Gee, the house that I went to look at 2 or 3 days ago that had an 18-foot horizontal crack was up Warm Springs.
Oh,
And it wasn't down where you'd expect the settling to happen. It was way up on top of a hill where there's these high power tension lines. It was way up there within around 25 feet of the high power tension lines. I don't know that. And it was way up on a hill. So the whole house was fine. The home was built in the 70s. So it's been there for, 50 years. And it was 18 feet long. Oh, another thing. If they mention cracking, but there's no picture, it's because the crack was so small it wouldn't show up in a picture. And for us, it's about 1/4 inch. If it's 1/4 inch or more, it'll usually show up. So we do give them pictures so that they can evaluate it or show it to someone else without having to have some guy crawl underneath there. And so this lady, she's in her 60s. She's going through divorce. So I said, are you going to sell the house or keep it? If she was going to sell the house, it'd be an issue. She's going to have to, goop it or do something, treat that. She says, no, I'm keeping the house. I said, okay, well, here you go. This is what's happened in 60 years. Do you notice any? Oh, and then another thing. God, I'm glad you asked that because this was a big deal. First thing I did was I went underneath the house, and when I saw that big crack, oh, man. So then I went upstairs along this living room wall and looked for cracking in the sheetrock. None. No cracking in the sheetrock. Look way up on the top where the sheetrock hit the ceiling. Perfect. Walked up and down. I noticed no crowning, no sloping. So then I went to the outside. When you go to the outside, a good way to judge, I forgot this part too, with foundations, like in an area, like a Blossom Valley, Wilton, those areas, when you go to those areas and you look at the sidewalk, you'll see a lot of waving in the sidewalks. So you can kind of tell, this area goes up and down because of the moisture. So that relates to your house. If the sidewalk's going up and down, chances are your house is going to be going up and down a little bit seasonally also. So with her, I went to the outside and looked, and she had like brick walkways. The bricks were all fine. If it was settling was an issue, some would have been up, some would have been down. And she said, "Oh, these were here when we moved in, like 20 years ago, and they're fine." So, well, I don't know how in the hell that crack got there, but it's there. But there's no settling. I look at the stucco. The stucco looks fine. The sidewalk looks fine. Inside your house looks fine. If I didn't show you this picture of this crack down there, you'd never know it's there. So just seal it, get that goop, seal it up. And I don't really think you need any clamping the metal straps on it because it's not happening anymore. If it was happening, the bricks would all be out of whack. The stucco would be cracking. Nothing cracking. There. I hope that puts a lot of people at rest. Look at the conditions. If it's cracking, it has to show something. Like I got a scratch. If there's no blood, don't worry about it. If there's a crack in the foundation, but you don't know it's any symptom, don't worry about it. Just seal the crack. Put a Band-Aid on the cut, seal the crack with the goop. Okay, done.
Yeah. Okay. And there's a question, maybe you understand. So is the crack on the foundation beam, is that serious?
Foundation beam?
Foundation beam, BEAM.
What's a foundation beam?
Sure.
If it's a wood foundation, it's got a beam. I would call the agent because they sold you a raft. This isn't a house. It should be in a river floating somewhere. I don't know what the foundation beam is.
Got it. Okay, I'll check with you later. So that's a lot of questions on cracks, which is good. So coming back to the other question. So a question from Gerard. Recheck your understanding on the grounding requirements for GFCI receptacles. The National Electrical Code allows GFCI receptacles to replace non-grounded, the two-prong receptacles. So what gate? So what you just mentioned about the GFCI thing?
I believe they should be three-pronged, but again, I mean, if he knows more about it than I do, fine.
Okay.
I believe it should be three-pronged, but I don't.
Okay. And then you mentioned about the sheet metal is required to cover the garage side of a standard interior door, right? So which kind of, what I guess, which kind of requirements for that sheet metal is.
I don't know the specifics of it. It's not like tinfoil. It's like the flashing, or you know what gutters are made of, or well, flashing. You know, flashing up on top of the roof. It's you know, it's thick, not so thick. It's bendable. It's the kind of sheet metal that you can bend, but fire is not going to easily get through. That's what it would take. And that's only if it's an interior door, you know, the kind of door that is, you know, the hollow door. Hollow door, put sheetrock, put the flashing on. If it's not a hollow door, it's fine.
Okay.
And then don't forget that has to automatic shut. Something to automatically shut the door all the way.
Okay.
And a threshold. I forgot to mention threshold. If you don't have a threshold, fire will find that little 1/4-inch crack underneath and slip into the house. So it has to have a threshold also.
Got it. Okay. So, and then that's, you know, regarding on the foundation, that's for the single family home. So what do you check in condos during home inspection?
We check what the homeowner owns, and the definition of home ownership in a condo is you own up to the inside of the outside wall. Up to the inside of the outside wall. So you're in the condo and you got the inside wall, then you got the outside wall. Where's the piping and stuff? In between. So everything up to if you take the inside walls out, what's left? The outside wall. So you own up to the inside section where all the pipes and electrical is, that's all yours. They own the outside of the outside wall. You own the inside of the outside wall in. So all that's yours. So that's what we check. We don't check anything that is owned by the association. The roof, that's theirs. How about the deck? Who owns the deck? They do. They own the deck. But if your deck is going to be falling, just common sense. If we're there and it's a wooden deck, we're not going to say, oh, they have it. We don't care if you fall through, blame them. No. We will check anything that we see that could be a hazard to you, because even though they own it, we don't want you, the client, to trip through that, or we don't want it to get rotten and not tell you about it. So we will, you know, the railing, everything that we can get to, we will check, but not the roof, certainly not the foundation. The foundation, even in a townhouse, we will, when we go underneath, sometimes some townhouses have a crawl space. There'll be in the end of the garage, there'll be a little bit door and you can go in there. We will go in there. And if we see something wrong, we will tell you. Oh, it's another thing. Glad you mentioned that. What about the pillars? Underneath the home, there's pillars and they've got the like a cement, supposed to be a cement slab. On top of that, you've got usually a 4x4 sticking up against the joist, you know, the floor joist holding the floor. Very often when they cut that, it didn't get cut right. So they'll put a shim. Shim's just a little like a shingle piece of wood. They hammer in there to make it flush, to make it supporting. Sometimes way later, 20, 30 years later, some of those floor supports may pull away. That's kind of a sign. If the ground is sinking, the little floor pillars will pull away, and you can see the joist is just sitting there. There's nothing underneath it. So then what they'll do is get shims and hammer shims in there to keep it supporting the joist still.
Okay, and going back to the foundation, so the worst case scenario, Chirag is asking, worst case scenario, how much does it cost to fix the foundation issue? I think it really depends, because I've seen different kind of quotes, I kind of answer that for that. So he's asking, what is the settling issue?
What's the settling issue?
Mm-hmm.
The settling is, you can't, that's when they have a settling issue. That's when I tell them, look at like this lady today and the one from yesterday who had that huge crack, probably just from settling, I'm guessing. Do you notice anything on the inside? No. Well, then you don't have anything to worry about. There's no crowning. Everything is working fine. And there's no way you can stop settling. You can't, because that's the line of, you don't want to live in an area where there's settling. Go to Arizona. There's no water in the ground there. but if you stay here, there's going to be settling. Some places severe, some places not severe. But even if there is settling, if you can live in the house fine for 20 years, who cares what the hell the ground's doing underneath?
Got it. Okay. And then some audience is asking for your phone number, Larry.
What? Yeah, it's a 408, and this, don't tell anybody. I'm going to give you my cell number. 408 472 3813. 408 472 3813.
That's awesome. This is actually the end of our seminar. So
Oh.
everyone has been unmuted so that you can say thank you to Larry. If you have anything else to say, or you can stay and chat, be sure to join us in 3 weeks for the next 10 seminar with David Bonacorsi. Have a great night.
Okay, we will.
Thank you, Larry.
Thanks, kids. See ya.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, Larry.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Coco and Larry. We really appreciate.
Thank you.
Did you learn something?
Of course.
Of course. Good girl. Good answer. Good answer. Makes me feel good. Whether you made it up or not, I don't care.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Larry.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for listening.